Hello, Mary Beth. Good evening. It's good morning for me, but good evening to you in Seattle. I'm delighted to speak to you. This is, as you know, the 40th anniversary of Intact Academy, the coach school, and I'm inviting all these people that have inspired me along the way to have a chat and to talk about their newest ideas about change and how coaching works. So you have been in my life for a long time because actually Executive Coaching with Backbone and Heart was one of the first books I bought on executive coaching. So I'm really doubly delighted. So maybe you want to introduce yourself now.
Well, I have been a leadership consultant and executive coach for too long. I've been saying 30 plus years. So I think I'm getting close to 40 now. And I've worked with leaders and teams. So not only one-to-one coaching with leaders, but also most of my work was live team coaching with leaders and teams. And I was always had kind of a double focus with them, which was to have higher engagement, have higher team engagement, and also to produce actual business outcomes, organizational results, and that the two come together. And if you work those two, then you get what I call breakthrough results because it surprises even them that they exceed even their targeted goals when you work the two together. And so that's what I have been doing for the last 35 plus years. But I'm also now focusing on training organizational development consultants and executive coaches, particularly around how to increase and crack the code around leader commitment and ownership to
Yeah,
the projects that they work on with us.
yes.
Because I believe that's the single most important factor, really.
What do you mean by executive commitment? Because I can imagine lots of stuff around that.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I just did a workshop on it today, and I talk about, like leaders often say, yeah, I'm committed. And what they mean is a one and done, kind of like they wash their hands. Yes, I've given you permission. Yes, go ahead. Or yes, I'm mandating it. Now it's your job to do it. But that's not what I mean by leader commitment, because leader commitment is an ongoing thing. And what it means is that they realize in their bones that they're the ones that are going to have to stay involved so that this change, whatever change they want, really needs them to be committed to it until the end. And what that means is that they have to give their time, their energy, their inviting participation from teams or their boss or their peers or their customers, vendors, wherever the change is focused. And that if they don't do those things, if they don't have that in their bones, then at best they're going to get lukewarm results, and at worst it'll be a failure.
Yes.
So and I'm training consultants and coaches around this because it's a win-win or it's a lose-lose proposition, because we're only successful if our clients are successful. So that's why I see leader commitment really as the central piece.
Yeah. I often say leadership is the art of repetition because you have to repeat, repeat, repeat. It's also energetic, I think. I know if they don't focus their energy on it, it just doesn't happen.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I'm just really kind of on fire about. Not, I mean, I have been my whole career, but somehow I hadn't gotten it down to those two words, leader commitment. Like that really focuses it, because I was, think about the leaders functioning and, how well of a sponsor are they being? But really, it's all about their own commitment and how they are externalizing that.
Yes. And I think the externalization is really important in that as well. Got a
Yeah.
lot of leaders who say, I'm really successful. I said, do you ever tell people what you do? No. One of the things I know you're also really interested in is this term of the four passages of change. We've been talking a little bit about, what does it take to support, to facilitate change in executive coaching? Whole debate about what change is and if coaching is actually the place where change takes place. What are you thinking about that? What
Mm-hmm.
change really?
Well, the way I think of it is that it's an inside job and it's an outside job. So the inside job is often well, it's kind of where coaching started, I think. was the inside job, like the development of the person. Started as personal coaching and then kind of expanded out to executive coaching. And that's a big part of what we do. That's the whole area of leadership development internally. And they're sitting in a system. There's a much larger context that they're sitting in. And it's why I think of executive coaching as more than personal coaching, because they have to deal with the system that they're in.
Yeah.
And also there's this is where a consulting perspective can be very useful, I think, to executive coaches, because consultants have a larger understanding of how organizations work, period. And also they understand group process and group process designs and what are effective ways to help people talk with each other. And there are lots of patterns that get formed in systems, many of which are dysfunctional, that the leader has to address. Yeah. So it's more than their own. They have to bring that personal development externally to, this is the part of the high engagement with their team, to shift dysfunctional patterns into functional patterns and help them push against any dysfunctional patterns that are in the larger system. So that's a large part, I think, of where change is going to be successful, if they're able to punch through some of the homeostasis, the trance that people are in or an organization's in, with patterns that aren't working for them.
Yeah, so it's the internal work and then again the externalization of it. One of the debates here is really about the difference between therapy and coaching. The fact that personal coaching is getting closer again to therapeutic interventions. How do you explain that to people, if you see a difference?
I see a difference in training, first of all, because I have actually, when I taught in graduate school, my colleagues, we had two tracks. One track was organizational development and leadership, and the other track was systemic therapy, family systems therapy. So my colleagues were both consultants and therapists.
Yeah, like me, I was trained that way as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had a chance really to appreciate therapists, being trained to know how to diagnose emotional and mental illness in ways that personal coaches are not trained. So if there is any kind of emotional, I like to say emotional illness, because mental illness is more than just whether your mind is working or not. But if I'm experiencing any of that in a client, I know it's above my pay grade. I know that I don't have the diagnostic or intervention tools that they do. Mm-hmm. Now, what I love about that, and what I had colleagues who were family systems therapists, and I used family systems in organizations in terms of this pattern breaking.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I could refer a client to a family systems therapist, we would be working in concert with each other. We'd be kind of using a same worldview. And I would recommend, here's where I would recommend therapy to a client, is if they get what the change they need to make, there's no resistance to that. They're not fighting me on it. They're facing it, but they're making no headway.
Yeah.
And it really is a deeper issue. And then I recommend therapy. And if they take my recommendation, if they go for it, oh my gosh, they can grow so fast. We continue our work, but they're also doing the therapeutic work, and wow, it's a geometric progression. Yeah. So that's one way that I think of. And the other way is more like in terms of how we view ourselves, which is that clients often will just spontaneously start talking about, well, I had this going on in my family, and that's why I do what I do. It's a reaction to this or that in my family. They'll go there when we're talking to them about dealing with their teams, because they feel a lot like families. And I welcome that. I welcome that spontaneous kind of like just conversation with them. But I don't focus there. I'm focusing on, okay, you have an insight about that. Now, how is that relevant to this work situation
today? Yeah,
that's a redirect that I think is our job.
Yeah. Shall we go back to these 4 passages of change, because I'm intrigued, because you said, I really think these are the areas where
Uh-huh.
real change
Yes.
happens. So
Yeah, I call it the consultant and executive coach roadmap. If it's a roadmap, there are passages that you go through.
yeah,
And, I mean, I could have said like stops along the road or, exits or whatever, but I thought, you know what, passages has kind of a double meaning in the sense of, yes, you're on a journey, but also passages, there's something like initiatory to it.
transitional. Yeah.
Right. There's like an initiation through the passage. And these are quite big, important maturing processes that leaders have to go through in order to be successful with change. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to stick with the word passages. And they're the 4 Ps, P as in pot. So the first one is presence. And the way, what kind of presence, because I loved what you're saying about energetically, it is about, what are they throwing off? What kind of energy are they throwing off? What are they bringing from inside them? And a colleague of mine, Roger Taylor, and I are now co-authoring a book called Leading with Backbone and Heart. And we're talking about leadership stamina. What does it take? What kind of presence do you need to have? And that needs to be enduring over, some of these pressures that you feel. And a big part of leadership stamina is facing the kind of challenges that they will face, exactly the ones that they want to avoid. And there's all kind of reasons for why they avoid it. And some of it is their own lack of maturity or development. But we all, under stress, will have avoidance strategies. So often we're meeting people where what might be up front and what we notice is how they're avoiding their challenges. So that's all in presence passage. And another big part of that is the phrase backbone and heart, because usually when they're bringing their presence, it's usually imbalance. They're not bringing enough backbone, which is clarity. Are they clear about what their position is, and can they articulate it clearly? And heart is, are they interested in, do they have compassion for the people around them, and are they pulling on them, like really wanting to know what they think, feel, and want, being willing to be influenced by them? And that we all come usually with some kind of habit of imbalance when we're stressed. So helping them have more maturity in their presence is bringing that backbone and heart. The next passage is principles. I'm realizing more and more that there's a certain way to share a principle with a client that doesn't, like ICF is so nervous about clients becoming emotionally dependent on us. We can't say too much, because we just have to ask them questions because we don't want them emotionally dependent. I'm like, well, you know what? There are times when I can say one sentence out of, it's kind of like a universal principle that I've seen either through research or just through, 35 years of working in organizations. This thing is true universally. And it applies directly to their situation. And there's a way to share that principle so that it helps them face their challenge rather than turn away from it or become emotionally dependent on us. That's irrelevant. It's not about becoming emotionally dependent. It's about them seeing a broader landscape that they can now.
Yeah, giving them a language to conceptualize what they're going through. Can you give an example?
Well, one that happens a lot in my early years was leaders who complain. There's a performance issue with a team member. It's like, it drives me crazy. They don't this and that and the other thing. And, it's been shown over and over again. So I say, well, 80% of employee troubles are due to manager neglect. And that usually I just say that one sentence, period, pause, don't be the next person to speak. Let it just simmer in them and see how they react to it. And sometimes they'll go, yeah, but you don't know this person. Well, okay. But 80% of the time. So the question is, are you in the 80% or are you in the 20%?
Yeah.
So, and there's a way to find out.
Hmm.
And so then I just say, these are the kinds of things that employees need so that they're high functioning. And it's all employer stuff. It's like you have to be clear about the job and your expectations. You have to train them if they need it. You have to monitor. Da 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 da. Okay, so and now I'm throwing it back to them. This is the coaching thing, finding out. So how would you self-assess your about how you do on that with this employee? And they talk it through, and they wind up throwing themselves in the 80% category.
Yeah.
Busted, yeah, it's because of what I haven't been doing. So
Yeah.
that's a way to use a principle that stimulates their thinking.
Yeah, and I think part of our job is being truth tellers in a way, because we've seen so many leaders and over so many organizations. There
Mhm.
are universal, well, kind of universal truths.
I think it's holding out on our clients if we're not saying these kinds of things to them. So the third one is power. And how are they using the authority that they have by virtue of being in the role? Leadership roles usually have a certain amount of decision making power in them. And how are they using that? Because it's on a continuum. They can totally abuse it, or they can refuse to use it. They might think of it as radioactive, and I'd rather just kind of talk to my employees and sort of sell them on the idea rather than maybe insist, and they get kind of squiggly about it. And what the danger in that is that if they have a certain amount of decision making authority and they're not making the decisions, or they're not clear who's making the decisions, then a lot of things start to fall apart.
Yeah.
So it's helping, we're helping them use authority collaboratively. And then the last one is patterns, because it's really important to identify dysfunctional patterns and shift into more functional patterns. So how is this related to change? No leader is going to make a change unless they bring their presence. No leader is going to make a change unless they can see a wider landscape than they've been looking at, because they've tried everything they know. No leader is going to make a change if they're not using their authority collaboratively. And no leader is going to make a change if they let dysfunctional patterns sit. So and these are all interrelated with each other.
I can see that. So, can you talk a little bit more about the patterns, the dysfunctional patterns? Maybe give an example. Yeah, or how you frame it, how you identify it.
Mm-hmm. It's really fun to help a leader identify a pattern. Let's imagine this is a real client. I'll just call her Deborah. It's not a real name to protect the guilty. And she was a command and control leader, and she had kind of a desperate situation on her hands, because this was about July, as I recall, and they had a January to December financial year, and they had just landed a new client that part of the deal was that they were going to take on the cost of the client onboarding, and it was $250,000, and it was not in their budget. And so they were going to blow a hole in the budget, and her boss was very unhappy about that. So she's trying to figure out, yikes, what are we going to do about this? But she's complaining to me about my team shows no initiative. Here the house is on fire, and they're showing no initiative, and it's driving me crazy. And I tell them what to do, and they just do it, but they're not thinking outside the box, And I've sat in on some of her meetings, and because I was going to do live team coaching, and I'm thinking to myself, I know exactly why they're just complying, because she's filling the space. She's not giving them. So then I sit down with the client, and I just draw a semicircle, a semicircle line with an arrow, and then a semicircle line with another arrow, so that we have finished a circle. And I put L on the top and team on the bottom. And I talk about you and your team, all teams are co-creating the way that you're interacting with each other. And you have a pattern. Every team has a pattern, and you're in a pattern that you're really frustrated about. So what do they do that drives you crazy? And then she starts saying they don't take initiative. And I'm, writing this down on the board or whatever. And okay, and then what do you do? When they just sit there in that meeting, then what do you do? Well, then I'm forced to tell them what to do. So then I'm giving them every detail because they're not coming forward with it. Oh, okay, I get that. And then what do they do when you do that? Well, they'll go out and they'll do it, but they're not taking the next step. So then they come to the next meeting, and then what do you do? I'm telling them how to do it. So now we know what it is, and it's frustrating. But then I'm like, let's just really hone this in, because you want it to be so succinct that then they start to attach. They can start to see it when it happens. So I ask them, what's the one word verb of what you do and what's the one word verb of what they do? Like, let's get it down. And then we just brainstorm together. What are you doing? Well, I'm asking. Are you? Are you really asking? Okay, I'm telling. Okay. And we brainstorm telling, there's commanding, there's expecting, insisting, there's just all these words. And then what are they doing? Well, they're implementing. And they think of adjectives like they're timid, they're this or that. Okay, if they're timid, what are they doing or not doing? Well, they're complying, And so we have this list, and then I ask them, what's the most compelling word of what you're doing? And what's the most compelling word about what they're doing? Because I really want them to own it, and it's got its energy to it. It's like, yes, this is driving me crazy. And so it turns out her command, she was really sick of commanding detail stuff, and theirs was comply. Command, comply. Command, the more she commands, the more they're complying, which causes her to command. Yeah. And so it's like, have we got it? Yes. Okay. Now, what do you want it to be? How do you want, like, I'm hearing you kind of want to be different too. You don't want to just have them change. You'd like to not have to do that, right? So what would you be? So we do go through the same brainstorming thing. And she came up with, well, I don't believe they can do it. Like, she was skeptical. Yeah. But if we're going to talk about the promised land, this is just the promised land. Okay. I'd love it if all I had to do was give parameters, and then they would initiate and they would think outside the box, and they would, and so on this one, it really had to be 2 words. It couldn't get down to one verb, but it was like give parameters on her side, and then on their side, initiate. And then that's a functional and creative and collaborative circle. Yeah. So I worked with her. I did live team coaching with her. There was very intense work with them. It was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing that this supposedly compliant passive team wound up. I mean, I had to do a lot of live team intervening around the pattern, and they both knew they knew the side, but they knew both ends of the side, both sides of the pattern. Yeah. So it was fun actually to intervene. But they got to the point where the team was doing all the ideas. The team was, as long as they had those parameters. In other words, the team was ripe. She was really suppressing what they were able to do. Yeah. And it turned out that they were able to do that $250,000 cost and make budget. So that's what I mean by it. That's a breakthrough result. Absolutely. Yeah. How did they make that happen? And I love the example because it's so frequent that we come in and, the complaint, the presenting problem is, they're not taking initiative, and they don't realize that they're part of that pattern. So it's a beautiful example of what we can do as executive coaches, really. I really like these 4 passages of change. I understand that you've got a booklet on this as well, which you might be willing to share. Yes. This consultant and executive coach roadmap, I would be happy to send to anyone who would like it. And as I was mentioning to you beforehand, I'm doing a massive changeover of platforms. So the most reliable way to get this is to just email me. And my email address are my initials, MBO at cnet.com. CNET is spelled like Seattle, SEANET.com. So MBO at cnet.com. Yeah, be happy to pass it out to you. That's fantastic. I think my students will be very happy with that, and my executives. So last question, if anyone would want to start up as an executive coach today, what would your top advice be? Well, we've really been talking about it, and it's kind of what I'm on fire about now. One is that just track the commitment of the leader. It's everything, really, because as long as they're committed, a lot of change is possible. If they're not, no change is possible. So that's one. The other is you'll be stronger if you can bring tools from both executive coaching and consulting. And therapy, to do the deeper work is... If needed. If needed. Yes. But I believe that that's where coaching is headed, because we've had a chasm between coaching and consulting. Yeah. And I think it's an artificial one.
Yeah, with the team coaching, it's going to break up more.
And thirdly, is I really do believe it's important to really help leaders be collaborative with their authority. I don't think it's a coincidence that there are so many authoritarian leaders now politically, and at the same time, so many people have been allergic to authority. Like, it's like if you're not willing to engage with authority, just the power that's invested in you and your role, if you can't figure out a way to do that humanely, the authoritarians know how to use authority. So don't leave it only to them. So we need strong people, we need strong leaders who know how to use authority well and humanely and collaboratively, so that the authoritarians don't take over the whole space.
I didn't want to mention it, but yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Well, thank you very much, Mary Beth, for this time. And sure, everyone will make use of your executive and coach roadmap, and we'll plan a fireside chat. I'll be seeing you soon.
Yes, it's been fun, Sadi. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome.